Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.
Hi folks, welcome back to Through a Scottish Prism. Nice to be with you again. Hope you and yours are well. Right, a lot's been happening, lots and lots happening, and I hope you enjoyed our programming on Friday. If you hadn't, go onto the YouTube channel or the Rumble channel or our Telegram channel or Twitter and look up the ICG. It was a very popular program, worth a wee look. But let's go on. We've got lots to talk about that's been happening away from The Hague and in Scotland and round about Scotland. So let's get the crew in right away. Our favourite lawyer, let's get in the wonderful Eva Comrie first. Hello, my friend.
Hi, Roddy. It's been one hell of a week once more. For Burns, I suppose, aficionados, there's been a quotation for every day of the week this week in so many different ways. But I think today's is about man's inhumanity to man. But hopefully some of today's events are going to begin to help us to get back onto the right road as the human race.
Well, we can but hope. And over there in Edinburgh, it's our Lloyd.
Hi, Roddy. How are you doing?
Not bad. Long time no see. Yeah, doing great. Great to see you here. And of course, over there, the Coatbridge Cavalier over in the US of A, I think.
Yeah, I'm back in Fargo now. Well, I'm actually in Moorhead in Minnesota, and waiting for my next assignment. So I don't know where I'm going to go next. Maybe anywhere between Argentina and Alaska, I've been told. So let's see. Hopefully a wee bit closer to home.
When I hear you saying Fargo, I always reminds my mother-in-law. She used to go in her favourite phrases, Martin, Barton, and Fargo, which was her polite way of saying she had it.
Enough.
Right, and unfortunately, our Yvonne can't join us today. She's had all sorts of problems today, and car troubles, and she's stranded. Had managed a couple of punctures in the one day, and this is horrific weather, not good. So she will not be joining us. It doesn't look like. So let's kick on right away. I'm sure my fellow guests that are still here can carry the day, even without our Shirley Temple. Last week we were talking about the defeat of Neil Hanvey's Scotland self-determination bill, Lloyd, and from it we found out when the numbers come out that the Tories virtually abstained from it, and it was actually the British Labour Party who voted against it. And then so we know that they voted down Scotland's right to democracy, and yet this week our First Minister, our much travelled First Minister, was writing a letter begging Keith Starmer for a meeting to see what common ground they could find before the general election. And there's that letter. What part of Beat It Scotland does Humza not understand from the Labour Party, Lloyd?
I think Humza just doesn't have a clue about politics, frankly. The whole idea that the First Minister of Scotland, any First Minister of Scotland, before a general election has happened, is already declaring his support for one side or the other. That's not the purpose and function of the leader of the Scottish National Party or indeed the First Minister of Scotland. Everything and anything that he does should be for the benefit of the people of this country, not for the benefit of his somewhat teetering political career. I just find it sad, but and I use this phrase all the time. It's the paucity of intelligence at the top of the Scottish Government and at the top of the Scottish National Party that is taking our country in completely the wrong direction and leading to an increase in Labour in the polls, because we don't have a good story to tell, and it's not a good story in the run-up to a general election to be begging a British party for anything.
No, you're absolutely right. But it's not just the begging of a British party either. As I say, they've rejected every hand and turn. The two English nationalist Labour MPs in Scotland, Murray and Shanks, and they voted against the self-determination bill. And here's Humza a few days later trying to, make parley with them. Has he got no dignity?
No, he doesn't have any dignity, and he's embarrassing Scotland, quite frankly. The days of the begging bowl should be long gone. He should be dictating terms, and the terms should be this is the route to independence, and that the independence movement should be united. Sooking into Labour will get him absolutely nowhere. And what I thought was actually rather arrogant in his letter was he was trying to tell Keir Starmer that he's got policies that Starmer should implement throughout the UK, including in England and Wales, where Humza Yousaf's writ doesn't run. And one in particular was the Scottish child payment he thought should be extended throughout the whole of the United Kingdom. And he referenced, obviously, the bedroom tax and the two-child rape clause. Now, I agree with Humza. I think most of Scotland agrees with Humza that the Scottish child payment is a good thing. But it exists because we are not an independent country. Were we an independent country where people were paid decent wages and decent welfare benefits, higher than the level we're currently able to pay under devolution, and had we control of our own resources, whereby the cost of living didn't bite so hard because our fuel prices were able to be reduced and we were able to build decent houses for folk, then Scottish child payment wouldn't be needed. We wouldn't have the bedroom tax, we wouldn't have the two-child rape clause. What Humza's needing to do is to concentrate on getting Scotland out of the United Kingdom and leave the rest of the United Kingdom to get on with it themselves. We're not too poor or too stupid, but we are colonised not to be subsidised. We're colonised to be bled dry, and the quicker we get the hell out of there, the better.
Phil, can you give any credence to a British political party when you are meant to be the leader of the Independence Party of Scotland?
No, none whatsoever. I mean, there's parallels here with what the Scottish National Party is becoming is something akin to what the Irish National Party was until the rise of Sinn Féin. They've lost their way completely now. They've moved away from these basic principles, such as we don't support peerages. That should never change. Why the hell are you diving right into the worst aspect of this corrupt, unequal system that we currently suffer under? Why would you even tolerate it? Why are you engaging with these guys? Humza's a lost soul here. He's so out his depth and doing what he's told. I mean, people pay attention. He's doing what he's told. This is not good for the people of Scotland. The SNP are continuing to deconstruct the unification that the establishment so fears. And he's also rejecting every helping hand from the good guys. Every offer, just about every offer, every opportunity to unite the independence campaign and get us back on track and get us the only thing that will make any difference, which is us looking after our own affairs. We sound like broken records here to some degree, but these facts are irrefutable. When you pay attention and you look up, you look to your history of what we were, what we've become, and where we're going, and you get the inside track that we've got the benefit of. In fairness, a lot of people don't have the time or information. But the truth is out there, folks, and we need to keep looking to commentators who will speak the truth and do not fear standing up for what's right. But Humza is a liability. And the current incumbents in the Scottish SNP leadership are taking us further and further away from the unification and the principles that will eventually one day get us our independence.
That's the worst part, Lloyd, is that, he won't talk to the other leaders of the independence parties. He doesn't want to talk to the Yes people. If he's not chatting away to Annas to try to get a deal with him, he's talking to Starmer. It's just quite incredible that he won't talk to the Yes people, but he wants to talk to the No people all the time.
It makes it so clear that the current SNP leadership is about maintaining their position. It's not about advancing the cause of the people and the cause of the country. It's about retaining and concreting to the ground their position. But that, in fact, exposes them for the lack of analysis. This attempt to be all things to all men except the people that are on your side is not the message that will get people out of their homes and into the polling booth and marking that X beside the letters SNP. It will do the opposite, because they're putting doubt into people's minds. If he wants to make a deal with Labour, Labour can't be all bad. It's obvious. That's the message. That is the message that he's giving. So Stephen, Noon, Kevin, whatever your name is, you people really better get yourselves thinking instead of simply trying to protect the SNP and its position. It's an extraordinary situation. The fact is, I think they're frightened of talking to the Yes campaign. They're frightened to talking to the other independence parties, because their commitment, and particularly the Yes movement, the non-party movement, their commitment to independence is so absolutely rock solid. They have the information, they have the plan, they have many, many concepts of how we can achieve the independence of our country. That says to me that the SNP is not that interested. If you're not talking to the people who have done the work, and you've not done the work, as was clearly stated by the previous First Minister's Chief of Staff at the inquiry the other day, if you haven't done the work, then you damn well better get out and speak to the people that have. I don't know of an independence movement anywhere on the planet that doesn't draw in all the talents, all the expertise, and even you draw in the people that you don't agree with because you agree on one thing. What destroyed the Labour Party, the real Labour Party, was the abandonment of socialism. What is currently destroying the Scottish National Party is the abandonment of nationalism and the fight for our country's freedom.
Indeed. In our show on Friday, we did on the ICJ, folks, as Craig Murray, I believe it was, it said, you know, or was it might have been yourself, like, is if one thing that unites, seems everyone in the independence movement and beyond in Scotland, is the plight of the Palestinians. Now, there's something for, they should be sending out a note to people about that, and that would unite the Yes movement and get us all on the same page, on the same topic, and get going. But no, he doesn't. You know, we give these, every week, you know, we name the titles. You know what techie's like, especially our Hazel, what you want to call it this week. Now, this week, I probably should have called this show Holmes's Banana Skin Week, because he just seems to have made one cock up after another. And one of them, or fallen into a trap. One of the others was that without a whimper, they had to, after all the big who and fuss, they had to agree to pay the British government more Scottish taxpayers' money to pay off the expenses of the Section 35 fiasco. How much more money from the Scottish taxpayers for bad policies and bad decisions are we going to have to suffer?
I think this is incredibly depressing, because to an extent it's simply the tip of a very large iceberg when you bear in mind issues that will surround, for example, the Hate Crime Act and the conversion therapy consultation heading towards a conversion therapy bill, because the latter will, if it's passed, probably lead to another Section 35. But what it indicates is, to use Hamza's own words, he's winging it, but he's been winging it for years, and his predecessor was winging it. And the problem with these people was highlighted completely in the exchange of WhatsApp messages, which I think was released today, whereby Hamza makes a comment about how in 2021, when he had just been appointed Cabinet Secretary for Health, it seemed like everybody had become an expert on public health measures, and they didn't know what they were talking about. And he was then told by Jason Leach, but you're an expert now, Hamza, because you've had 3 weeks training. And his response was, yeah, but I'm winging it. And Jason Leach said, so am I.
Yeah, exactly.
And actually, the excuse given by Hamza was that these sorts of messages were messages that were being made in private. They were private conversations. Now, whether or not they're a breach of civil service codes of conduct or protocol or whatever is an argument for another day. But it's interesting that Hamza thinks that private conversations are something that have to be treated differently from public statements, when he's the chap who was in charge of the hate crime bill, which does criminalise private conversations within the confines of a family home. So it's very clear to me, and it's been clear to the whole of Scotland, and unfortunately to those in power in Westminster, that since November 2014, Scotland's government, unfortunately, has not been fit for purpose, because most people in most of the top jobs have been and still are winging it. You know, we don't have, for example, a lawyer with an understanding of the law in charge of justice. We don't have a medic in charge of health. We don't have an expert on transport in charge of transport. And we certainly do not have a top grade first class economist as our Minister for the Economy. Far from it. In drugs policy, we have a woman who is very kindly and very positively minded, but she doesn't really grasp the enormity of the problem that she's got to deal with. Unfortunately, our cabinet in Scotland needs taken to pieces and completely replaced by fresh blood, either experienced people or people who've never had a chance to be in the job yet. And the only way Scotland will be run the way it should be run is when we have a government of all the talents. And that government of all the talents can arise from a concerted, united independence campaign where Humza Yousaf and his friends do listen to the yesers, ignore the no's within politics, create a constitutional convention, not after the general election as they're proposing, but before the general election. Create the convention, choose candidates of standing, calibre, experience, power, get them in each constituency, and you'll see the vote for independence won't be 52% as was announced today. It'll be 62% at the very least, because the people of Scotland will have hope, because they'll see themselves being addressed by folk that they can trust, that they will not just trust them to deliver independence, but trust them to run the country in a fashion that is competent, which is what the people of Scotland are desperately in need of. They're crying out for it.
Yeah, absolutely. While we're at it, we're talking about all the things that are going on. Techie, can you stick up the humble crofter for me? The humble crofter, our Ian Blackford. Let's get his picture up here. There you go, the humble crofter. He thinks that the SNP should give up their opposition to accepting peerages, and we should go right in with the British establishment, or should I say the English establishment, and we should have the Lord Humble Crofter of Skye. What say you as an independence man?
Absolutely over my dead body. That is not what it's about. We've committed to, when you joined the SNP, you understood that was one of our key policies. We're moving away from being part of the United Kingdom, and this is very much the darkest, the most corrupt aspect of it, an unelected second house, and to actually propose that we would support that in any way whatsoever goes completely against the absolute core principles of anybody that wants independence. We've said before, those of you who really want something before independence and nothing less, you need to get out the SNP, and Ian, you need to go. That's not acceptable. That is not what we're about, and certainly the persecutions that we've seen for salmon, all of the stuff that we now see from the SNP, we're getting the Section 35 fiasco and having to add that to the taxpayers' bill. What about the ferries, the rest of the GRR costs, the inquiry that persecuted Alex Salmond, all the other legal costs? It will continue, and this is the thing that makes it worse, because this kind of nonsense policy will continue while Humza and his ilk continue to be in charge. That clear out, keep talking about it. It's not happened, and it will not happen. They just change the figurehead, that and a few others, and you don't actually get any real change. What we are going to get now is a continuation of these embarrassments, of these catastrophic failures. They're not just bad, they're extremely poor judgment. The ferries is a disaster. It was an absolute disaster. And that situation that my colleague, Josh Wilson, and I sat in the Beatson charity event with a lot of very wealthy people, investors and business people, all there for good reason, and good on you, Beatson, for the work you do. And thanks to my brother Tony, who had a couple of tables there. It was excellent and a great cause. But the jokes that were flying about, SNP were the brunt of the majority of the jokes. The current incumbents, the Scottish government, were tied into most of the jokes. There's a couple about the British government, but mostly the Scottish government. And what we got now is a situation where, unless we stop this, these people who are comfortable in the union, who've done all right, thank you very much, get to continue to critique the SNP legitimately, for foolish, poor judgment, bad professionalism and incompetence. That's the damage that you're doing the current SNP leaders. You need to go, all of you need to go. This needs to change. We need to revert to the position we were under Alex Salmond, when we had policies that were sensible, and we had a government that proved to itself that despite of a diminishing budget every single year in real terms, we managed it to the best of our ability. Now there's a limit to that, because you cannot improve, increase or even maintain services if the costs continue to rise and your funding keep going down. So I think we're at a stage now where I think that a crash of the Scottish government is impending. It's now necessary. They can't recover this situation, and the embarrassment of these poor decisions, they will continue while these people are in charge, and they're continuing to do things and adopt policies that are counter to the principles that would lead us to independence. And that is not coming from the independence-minded people who still remain in the SNP, like Josh and like Lloyd, but it's coming from those who call the shots and who pull the strings on the puppets that are Humza and his ilk. So needs to change, and it's an absolute disgrace that we're now in a situation where we're a laughing stock, having done all that hard work to prove that we could govern our country. And yet everybody needs to bear in mind, this is what happens when you're in a devolved government. We're not much better than a big council. That's really all we are. Look at the devolved powers. Look, and to understand that, we're allowing these people who churn headlines at you as answers, who don't have an answer to how to get people out of Scotland. How do we get out of poverty? How do we fix the wrongs of this country? You don't see these naysayers or critiques of the Scottish independence movement coming up with anything like that. They have no answer. There is no answer under the current situation. And that is the damage that these shysters are doing. So I will never forgive Nicola or Humza. Ian, now, you're on that list, mate. You're being a peer? Forget it. That's embarrassing. Feed the edge. Your ego. I mean, and Joanna, I'm sorry, you're beginning to piss me off as well. The ego has landed on that one, and that has got to stop. You need to stop putting yourself first and think about the people of Scotland, because they're who are suffering. You're all doing all right, you know. You're all doing all right, but no, there's too much pain and suffering in the day-to-day lives of people, of Scots, and those who live and work there, and that has to be fixed, and it's not being addressed. It's making it worse. You're not contributing, Humza. Time to shift. Beat it.
On that, Lloyd, back in the day when I was first in the party, our job was to go down there and dismantle Westminster, not to join in it and help by taking non-elected positions in that abomination to democracy, the House of Lords.
Ian Blackford's attitude is frankly appalling. He's a man who changes his mind all the time. He changes his mind about his wives on a regular basis, and he changes his mind about peerages. Only 3 years ago, he was all over the front pages of the Glasgow Herald, telling everybody that under no circumstances should the SNP take part in the House of Lords, that we wanted the House of Lords shut down. The bold Tommy Sheppard has even laid down a suggested bill for the abolishing of the House of Lords. How long are people going to be allowing themselves to be played here? I remember canvassing and campaigning for Ian in a by-election in Paisley, early 90s, I think it was. And that was Wee Socialist Ian. Wee Socialist Ian from Clermiston, a nice scheme here in Edinburgh. And what is he? What has he turned out to be? The man who wants to be on the leather. He wants to be on the red leather. He wants to be in the Carlton Club. He wants to have status, British status. Any member of the Scottish National Party that's elected, most especially, but I would suggest any member who wants to be part of the British establishment, you're in the wrong party. It's as simple and straightforward as that. The purpose and function of the Scottish National Party and the movement for national liberation is to withdraw from all the structures of the British state. We should not be, even if we take our seats at Westminster, we should be very, very selective about what we get involved in. And it's easy for bourgeois politicians to say, oh, but we're making a difference. We're making a difference from within. That's not true. Never has been. Look at the Labour Party. Labour Party socialists in 1920 were saying that they were going to change it all from within. How did that turn out exactly?
Indeed, indeed. But Dale, what do you think? Dame Eva Comrie of Clackmannanshire. Does that have a ring to it for you, Eva?
What do you think? No, it's such a terrible letdown, and I have a sinking feeling that Ian Blackford is far from the only person in the SNP that has these thoughts and these ambitions. Thankfully, there remain some within the SNP that were happy to slap him down. Joanna Cherry was one, and I think Stephen Flynn was another. But these are the people who really need to make plain what the SNP motivation and raison d'etre are. And we need to get a grip and get a move on. I don't know if you watch your slightly rival show, Indie Live, because our Independence Minister, Jamie Hepburn, was on it the other night, and he actually conceded under interview that it is possible to follow the plan proposed by Angus Brendan McNeill and have an early Holyrood election. Now, Jamie Hepburn is on video saying that can happen, and he went on to say the question is not whether it can happen, because legally it is feasible. The question is politically whether it should happen. Now, the answer to that second question is quite clearly yes, of course. The real question is, why does the SNP not have the motivation to make it happen? And that's where we keep going back to, is it country before party or vice versa? So by the time that this recording goes out, we'll have had the meeting that's occurring in Edinburgh, run by the Alba Party, which is in essence the Yes movement getting together yet again. We've had these assemblies on several occasions since the Supreme Court decision. There have been some half-hearted similar attempts made by the SNP. There is no reason on the planet why there isn't a joint movement and a convention of all the capable people in the country to figure out how we get either Scotland United for Westminster or a solution made in Scotland, by Scotland, for Scotland, where actually the independence movement of Scotland stands for Scotland, where Alba stands for Scotland and the SNP and the ISP stand for Scotland too, together. That's the way to do it, in a convention of like-minded people, because we know we are in the majority. Those politicians who do not agree to participate in such a plan or a proposal or a convention will find, like the Irish Party that we've often mentioned before, history will not be kind to them and other people will, in due course, take their place.
Here. And you certainly don't get Scotland independent by joining and sitting in the English House of Lords. I would just think, even in a social, having a laugh in the day of, imagine sitting in a company of Winnie Ewing, Margaret MacDonald, Margaret Bain, Dr. Robert McIntyre, and saying, what about us all, changing our policy and becoming lords down in Westminster? Can you imagine what it would have been like? They'd have thrown you out, you'd have been tuffed out in your ear for such heresy. And here we are. But as I said earlier, it's about whom's a banana skin week, Phil. And this week, out of the blue, I mean, with everything that's going on, Humza made a statement as the 400th godfather of a imprisoned Belarusian that he suddenly turned on Belarus. What the heck was that all about?
Yeah, again, deflection, playing games. He's playing a national leader of significance. And if Britain's a small island that nobody listens to anymore, what the hell is Scotland and Humza and the council
Could he have
government
had
he
a phone call
represents?
from Washington?
He's doing what he's told. Again, it goes back to the same thing. This is exactly the wording that you would expect from the establishment, from the British government. And that is exactly what Humza's doing. Because he's critiquing the unlawful arrest, which is a good thing. But put your own house in order. What about a certain Mr. Julian Assange? What about the false accusations and persecution of Alex Salmond by a cabal of shysters, including the Procurator Fiscal's office, as prescribed? This is all prescribed by the British establishment. You can't make one comment and have these double standards. We've already talked about with the earlier programmes that have been carried out. And another thing that sticks out as well, going back to the Humza and the Liz Lloyd. Humza's appearing at 2 p.m. in British time on Friday. Now, obviously, it'll have passed by then, we'll know what you've said, at the UK COVID-19 inquiry, but that's ongoing as we record this. And one of the things that Liz said, and I'm quoting, I didn't work on independence as much as people would have liked. No shit, Sherlock, Liz Lloyd. You know, the whole cabal has been moving things in the wrong direction. And the Scotsman is gleefully running a live blog providing updates on the COVID inquiry today. So we'll see what they say. But I think there was a KC, Claire Mitchell, was now questioning Liz Lloyd, or was, on behalf of the Scottish COVID bereaved group, and talking about the impact of lockdown on people's livelihoods I think that she was asked about the impact of the lockdowns had on people's livelihoods, which she said on reflection, the relationship between government and economic stakeholders was not great going into the pandemic and then deteriorated. It's a far cry from the personal statements and the high-profile status that Nicola enjoyed during that period. It's now been seen to be a bit of a sham. And, for me, I feel that statements like this, that Humza condemning Belarus, well, are you condemning... What about all the other acts of terror around the world? What about all of the other issues? And put your own house in order. We've got Julian Assange, a man with some Scottish heritage, who's about to be sent to the United States. He's been tortured to death currently in one of Britain's prisons. He should be standing up for that, and we've not heard a bleat for the SNP about that disgraceful breach of justice.
Yeah, indeed we have. I'll come back to you in a minute, Yvonne. I'm glad to see your car troubles are maybe over. Welcome. Lloyd, on the same topic, were you surprised when you saw Humza talking about a prisoner in Belarus?
I wasn't really surprised, because Humza, like a number of other members of the leadership of the Scottish National Party and cabinet members of the Scottish Government, are alumni of the International Visiting Leaders Programme of the United States. And everybody knows that you get phone calls. There's always a price to pay for being part of the British-American Partnership or being part of the IVLP. And a little bit of the price here is that Humza has been drawn into what is in actual fact a propaganda exercise, which is primarily being driven by the Ukrainian Secret Service to condemn Belarus, because Belarus supports Russia in the war against Ukraine. Now, there's nothing plainer than the nose in your face. Why would a Hutchie grammar boy from a Scots Pakistani family suddenly take a massive interest in a political prisoner, for want of a better description, being held in a jail in Belarus? Will we see what is his purpose here, other than taking part in yet another black propaganda operation? I mean, not unlike his pathetic crawling to Erdogan, the killer of Kurds.
Yeah, it's quite disgusting. Moving on, because the clock's beating us, and I'd like to move on, especially now you're here as well, Yvonne. Eva, there's an ongoing industrial tribunal, job tribunal in Edinburgh over the Edinburgh Rape Crisis Centre, which has been very enlightening. But you, with your equalities hat on, what have you made of all the stuff that's coming out of there?
I think actually Robert Burns, as usual, says it better than I ever could. A man's a man for all that. That's about all that has to be said. The evidence in the tribunal has been utterly appalling to read. There have been a number of witnesses who have explained more than once that the trans-identifying male who has gone on record repeatedly as confirming that he is a trans-identifying male and calls himself a trans woman, he's biologically male. But some of the witnesses for the Edinburgh service gave evidence to the effect that this Mriddle Wadwa is actually a biological female because he says he is. So the evidence has been that the service not only provides a service for both sexes, or as it would say, all genders, the service now tells women who ask for a same-sex counsellor or same-sex service that there are no men employed by the service, when some of the people employed by the service are biologically male. So we're in a set of circumstances where a service set up decades ago in very difficult times by women, for women, is now headed by a male, albeit that he says he's a trans woman, and is providing a service to women who are described as bigoted if they will not accept that trans-identifying males, i.e. trans women, are allowed to provide them a service, and by so doing refer to themselves as being women. The whole edifice needs to be ripped down. That particular rape crisis service should have the door closed today. What they did with one woman who I think was in her 60s and had asked for a female, a woman counsellor, she got an email telling her that her views were not compatible with the aims and the values of the service. So they didn't give her a service because she had the cheek, as a victim, a survivor of sexual abuse, she had asked for a female counsellor. What they didn't do was refer her on to the BERA service set up with funding from J.K. Rowling, which is run for females by females. They didn't refer her there. They left her dangling with no service at all when she'd gone to them in a time of need. So the conduct of that service is not just distasteful, it is downright harmful to some people, particularly when they're being told to leave their prejudice at the door, when prejudice is how they describe women who simply want to speak to and deal with other women. Surely to goodness, the end is nigh for the pathetic lengths to which this gender identity ideology has taken this country.
Indeed. I'd like to bring you in, Yvonne. Just before I do, Techie, can you stick up the statement from Brody's Trust, who have quite clearly said they will no longer use the ERCC, Yvonne, with everything that's coming out. And it's quite telling that something as well known and renowned and respected as Brody's Trust from the tribunal have seen and heard enough that they're now not going to send victims to that organisation.
Well, how can you send a traumatised woman who has been raped by a man into a centre where they're not going to feel safe because some of the staff are not women? And the head of this rape crisis centre has been the subject of all sorts of inquiries, and he doesn't even look as though he's qualified for the role. So there are lots of questions. The Rape Crisis Centre is in turmoil, and it's no longer a place where a woman who has been raped would really want to go. She wants to be in an all-female environment where she can feel safe and go through the help that she needs. And the fact that we're sending women into a mixed environment is shameful. It's the 21st century. This nonsense isn't progressive, it's backwards. It's taking us back to a different age, and we ought to be moving forward. And I'm not sure that many females will forgive Scotland for putting us through this nonsense so that people like myself and Eva are accused of being TERFs and bigots. And of course, you know, we're not. We think that everybody has human rights and is entitled to human rights, but not to the detriment of another minority group. And raped women are among the most vulnerable women in the world today. And they have a right to feel protected when they go into somewhere called a rape crisis centre. You know, the clue in the word is crisis. And we're letting these women down.
Indeed, we are. My 3 score and 10 plus a few more. I've never been more despondent when I think about it. SNP MPs wanting to be lords, men clicking their heels and saying they're women, all sorts of assorted flavoured gins. The world is not the place it used to be. I think the sacrilege of the gin is the one that upsets me the most, but that's another story for another day. On that, you know, talking of tribunals and the COVID centre, you touched on it earlier, Phil. Let's go into it in a wee bit more depth. The COVID, where Liz Lloyd threw everyone under the bus. She informed them that Nicola only had the one phone, whereas Nicola tried to tell us before that she had 2 phones, one for work, one for private messages. Humza was like a rabbit in the headlight, didn't have a clue. And one of the things you were saying about earlier about that, Eva, the conversation between him and Leach, one of them was Humza said, "Oh, I'll be found out in a week or 2." And Leach went, "So will I," as well. I was a dentist and I don't know what. Phil, did you follow much of the tribunal?
No, I didn't follow much of it, but I kind of knew where it was going. Well, I knew where I hoped it was going, but you don't always get justice, sadly, as we all know. That situation for me with Leach didn't surprise me because I know people that know him, and he was in it for the glory and the jazz hands more than anything else. And it's from the facial-skeletal surgeon side, the surgeon side and the dental side, the doctor's side. There's anyway, I won't go into the details. I won't betray any trusts, but the bottom line is, it didn't surprise me that this guy's been found out as a bit of a showboater, because let's face it, he was amongst some of the best showboaters in the town at the time. That was Nicola and her crew, and they know how to get in a bandwagon and play the audience. So no, it doesn't surprise me on the COVID inquiry. I mean, the fact that she didn't work on independence and sacrificed the core values of everything we stand for to work on this COVID. And I'm talking about Nicola and Liz Lloyd and all of the SNP. We'll see what the Scotsmen come out with and and all the other observers of this inquiry. But it is very much, as you say, they're running scared, because this is when the searchlight, those who thought they were protected, the light is now beginning to shine on them. Now, the problem is the light is shone by people who are using it for the truth, or their version of the truth, for their own benefit, which is to continue to deconstruct the independence movement. And that's why I will never forgive, and I've said it before, the current incumbents in the Scottish leadership, because they have made us a joke. made the Scottish Government joke, made the independence movement look amateurish, half-witted. I mean, there's some of these policies are so stupid that why on earth are they even contemplating them, never mind putting them in place? Well, we know why it is. They're doing what they're telling their foot and they're keeping on the gravy train. And getting back to that, there was something I read earlier about the situation on the ERRC Employment Tribunal, and it was from PM Online publication. A woman that runs the charity to help the victims is obviously being accused of hate crimes and was interviewed by police. And this is what the police officer said: "We need to speak to you to ascertain what your thinking was behind making your statement." Now, police have since been accused of investigating thought crimes, as we talked about before, and notably by advocates Roddy Dunlop and Joanna Cherry, and great credit to them all. But, you know, the Nicola Murray, founder of Brodie's Trust, a UK charity intended to support, she came out with a statement that said that women who've suffered pregnancy loss through domestic violence or forced termination, and she was interviewed by police on her comments that Brodie's Trust would remain a female-only service run by women for women and will not be intimidated into changing our stance in this matter. And that was in the Times. That's the kind of position we all should be taking. We should be standing up to these people. And the police, I don't know, I mean, as an ex-cop, I don't know how the police are planning to handle this. We talked about a few things of these issues before, but how can you investigate thought crime? What the hell is going on? Show me the police manual that's going to educate people and policy officers on how to investigate thought crime. It's absolutely goes beyond the pale. It's ridiculous, and it is the reason why we need RID.
Well, I don't know about that because my wife seems to know what I'm thinking about. They could use her. She can pick up. She got a radar. The clock's kicking on, Lloyd. Is there anything you want on the COVID inquiry that you wanted to put into the mix before I move on to the next question?
Yeah, just very quickly. It was, you know, I spent most of the day watching it, and what I found remarkable was the confidence of Liz Lloyd, a confidence that I've only really seen with people who know that effectively they're not in the dock. There will be no payback. There will be nothing. You know, they will not be damaged in the end by this because they were just toiling at the face as the Chief of Staff for the First Minister. And then the actual current First Minister comes on in the afternoon and his whole demeanour was one of fear. He looked like someone who was frightened of each and every question that was coming, and he did his usual thing of just talking until he ran out of syllables, which is something he really has to stop doing because it makes him look silly in front of, you know, the nation. But the central thing about it was we got the impression that the decisions that were being made throughout the entire COVID period, irrespective of the scientific or expert advice, the decisions will be made by Nicola Sturgeon and Liz Lloyd. And that's clear, absolutely clear from all of the WhatsApp messages that have come out, but it's also clear from Liz Lloyd's testament herself. But the way she subtly threw people under the bus, you know, on quite regularly, but she came across, and this is the thing, you know, we need to know more about this person. Her confidence, her aura of, would I suggest, invincibility was quite extraordinary because it even carried on after she'd given her evidence out into the street when she was confronted by journalists. And I'll give her an element of credit, she batted them away in a way that professional politicians do.
Well, maybe she did some media training from her very, very, very close friend and holiday companion, David Clegg. I don't know. The one that broke the story. This is for Police Scotland, if you're watching. They broke the story about Alex Salmon shooting the legal document that came out of Nicola Sturgeon's office where Liz Lloyd was the Chief of Staff. Join the dots, boys. Join the dots. Eva, you've got a young son. Is he 19, 20? Oh, you don't look old enough to have a child that age, I have to say. What age is it, Matt? 19?
Well, I'm not going to have to resort to shooting off one of his toes to prevent him from being conscripted, because he's going to have an Irish passport.
You knew the question before you even asked.
And under no circumstances will any member of my family or anybody over whom I have any form of influence ever fight for the British Army in an illegal war. What they will do is they will defend their own country and they will defend peace, but they will not participate in warmongering under any circumstances, because like everybody else here, I've got or had relatives who did fight in wars, and we know how horrific war is. And there are unfortunately times when bad people create wars and you have to take steps to restore peace. But it's peace and diplomacy that should be the first step, not war, which has become the hallmark of Westminster for far too long, and is yet another, if not the biggest reason why we need to get out of there the sooner the better. You know, I can say this because I have the luxury of saying it. I would rather starve than be thrilled for 1 minute longer to a country which has become known internationally as the American poodle and a warmonger. Where, you know, we said that Tony Blair had blood on his hands, but every prime minister before and since has. We need to be completely disassociated from these people without delay.
Here, I would suggest that the bloodthirsty and warmongering has been on a bit longer. Since 1066, I would suggest our southern neighbour has been warring and killing and going on. And in fact, if you actually think, we've only ever invaded England to defend ourselves and Ireland to help our cousins, whereas they've been pillaging everywhere. But Yvonne, you've got 3 boys as well. How do you feel about conscription? Do you think it's a good thing? It'll give them backbone and help the British Army? Would that be a great thing?
Absolutely not. You know, I've interviewed far too many mothers who've lost sons in conflicts, going back to the Falklands, to the Gulf Wars, to Iraq. You know, there was that wonderful mother, Rose Gentle, from Glasgow, her son Gordon. It's just crazy. And, you know, just the other day you were talking, Roddy, about the average age of soldiers in Vietnam was something like 19, but in Ukraine, it's
43 now.
43.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but Phil, Lloyd, and you shouldn't be sitting there feeling too comfortable, because this country is becoming so desperate. You should be expecting your call-up papers as well, wherever in the world you are, Phil.
I only just look this young. Yeah, I only look this young. I've actually had my call-up papers. I have been called up to the Tartan Army. I have to help invade Germany in June of this coming year. And anyone listening who's got tickets, I'm looking for tickets, okay? Moving on.
We're supposed to be at war with the Houthis, and the RAF is going out on these ridiculous missions, bombing the Houthi rebels. The only other people who are bombing the Houthis or attacking them or at war with them is Al-Qaeda. And now, thanks to the RAF, Al-Qaeda has its first air wing.
Yeah, they've got their own air force. God help us. What do you make, Phil, now? In the Côte d'Ivoire, a lot of unemployed youths. The British Army, you know, give them a trade and a gun, teach them how to shoot, and then send them back to Coatbridge. Sounds like a recipe for problems.
No, never. We don't want to see this conscription. I mean, and it's mostly words from the right-wing press and the establishment, the Mirror Group, etc. And there's a quote in the Mirror: "The whole of the UK must prepare for conscription within 6 years unless Vladimir Putin is defeated," a world affairs expert has told the Mirror. Getting these world affairs, just you got somebody for the military industrial complex to come in to speak to you. It's like asking advice from the City of London on how to run your economy. Do not do it. Do not listen. Do the opposite of what they say, actually. So, but thankfully downstream, Street was forced to rule out a widespread military call-up. And it was, but the head of the army, General Sir Patrick Sanders, said that British civilians would need to prepare to fight Russia in a future war. Under current government proposals, he said, it's predicted the number of fully trained soldiers will be reduced to 72,500 from a commitment of 82,000 by next year. And he told the International Armoured Vehicles Conference in Twickenham, what's happening there? Oh, aye, selling weapons. Who'd have guessed it? That the army would not be big enough to fight an all-out war with the former Soviet nation, even if it numbered 120,000. So General Sir Patrick said, we need a military that can expand rapidly and train and equip a citizen army, while a shift in mentality of the everyday person is needed. This is Corporal Jones. They don't like the cold steel up them. Captain Mannering. It is absolute nonsense. It's the commando comic. It's right-wing garbage. And the reality is we are peacekeepers. We're a peace-loving nation in Scotland. And the good thing that we can face is that the British people and the American people, over here, the American people are great people. They do not want to put boots on the ground anywhere. So all this jingoistic, saber-rattling nationalism can take a hike.
Yeah, the Americans always turn up late for the real fight. I'm glad I'm not in America or any intention of going there. Lloyd, you don't strike me as a man that would be in favour of conscription of Scots into the British Army.
No, when I saw the headline, I thought, whoa, that looks interesting, because the headline that I saw was it used the word citizen militia. Now, there was a very interesting book, now currently banned, but that was available in the mid-70s. It was put out by an anarchist group called the May the 1st Group, and it was called Towards a Citizen's Militia. And it was a beautifully laid out plan for everyone in the country. This would mean that we would not require an army, a navy, or an air force anymore, because everyone would be trained along the Swiss model, and everyone would be armed. And I just thought to myself, have the Brits lost their mind? Arm the people? You might pay a pretty high price if you do that in the long run, but I must say, I'm all in favour of a citizen's militia myself.
Well, I'm going to tell you, coming from Barhead, but some of the nutters there were given guns. Dear sweet God Almighty. Late serving them a pint or giving them their fish and chips. It could wipe out. Oh, stop it. It's not a laughing matter, but you can stick your construction where the monkey put its nuts, as they say.
Just one thing, Phil. There was a thing that happened this morning. A currently retiring United States Navy admiral has written a piece to advise the British that what they need to do is to rethink the size of their navy and give the Americans the 2 aircraft carriers.
Yeah, not a bad idea. But here's the other thing. Even if they were to get 500,000 new troops, how are they going to fund it? Where's the money coming from? How are they going to pay for it? If you're putting the 500,000 people into the army, they need to be paid, fed, dressed, armed. Load of nonsense. Anyway, let's move on to something else. Eva, I don't know. Richard Murphy, the tax research group, I think we're all familiar with him. He's put out a paper. The government have sneaked out a new law they intend to bring in to protect water companies. Now, as he's pointing out in this article, do we have that headline there, Techie? For this, whereby a few of these water companies down in England are facing bankruptcy. But unlike normal bankruptcy, what the British government are wanting to do is that they'll just be able to restructure their debt. The shareholders don't lose their shares. They don't lose any entitlement. The board of directors who are in place stay in place. And otherwise, it's the old story, Eva. They're socialising the debts and privatising the profits. And then they'll just rise out of the phoenix with no penalties and just trade on, although they've been trading insolvently. It's disgraceful. Yeah,
but Tories will Tory, won't they? And Labour will just do the same. It's only an extension of what we saw with, for example, the Panama Papers and everything that had disclosed. The rich get rich and the poor stay exactly in the grubber where we are. That's British politics. And, yet another reason where it needed for why we've got to get the hell out of there. This is all just right wing. They're doing it because they can. they'll get away with it because there's nobody particularly interested or powerful enough to not make it happen. The Tories will do this. Labour won't reverse it. There are so many things that Labour won't reverse, and yet they claim, in fact, not to support. And we cannot have a position in Scotland for one moment longer whereby we don't get the government that we want to have. Because these values and these processes and plans and proposals, whether it's jiggery pokery to do with the water companies or it's issues surrounding, for example, the bedroom tax or the two-child rape clause, these are not actually the values of the people of Scotland in the main. There's a majority view in Scotland that we're not necessarily socialist, but we're maybe social democrats, or, you know, middle of the road, slightly left to centre, a wee bit of Tory here and there, but nothing too extreme in either direction. Because what we really want is just fairness, egalitarianism, social justice, decency, where, you know, you can have a reasonable standard of living, a reasonable education, the ability to have further education, a chance to get a decent job, and we look after our own. You don't tend in the main in Scotland to find people who trample on each other unnecessarily to try to get to the top. You know, it probably explains a lot when you just simply talk about the 784 Theatre Company, the TV at the Stag and the Black Oil. Most of the people of Scotland know that it meant that 7% of the population owned 84% of the wealth. That has arisen over centuries of colonialism for Scotland, and it's time this year that we changed that once and for all and forever. And I go back to what I always go back to. It's got to be Scotland United. It's got to be a constitutional convention. We must stand up together for Scotland, for the good of everybody in the country, because independence will transform the lives of everyone in this country.
Yeah.
Not just the folk that vote for it, but the people that don't want it will find their lives enhanced when we are independent.
We will indeed. But this is the old story, Yvonne. Shouldn't we? I mean, it proves that the privatisation of the utilities doesn't work. The water companies are about to go. Should we not just renationalise them, bring them back into public ownership, and get rid of these bloody shareholders and have one shareholder, the public?
Well, it's a simple enough formula, and we should be doing it with all the utilities, with the National Health Service. We should also, when we get independence, is look to having to overhauling the media as well, to stop the crap from the south coming up here. All the tabloids at the moment are obsessing over King Charles's crown jewels, and they're saying, you know, that the nation's wishing him well. I mean, I don't wish him ill, but at the end of the day, why is there so much about this privileged, elitist individual who has a problem which is common in a lot of men? And while most people have to sit and wait months worrying, he just walks straight into a private hospital where his daughter-in-law has had a hysterectomy or something, and ordinary people like us have to wait months and months. Some people are dying on the waiting lists in the NHS. It's all wrong, and in an independent Scotland, the public should be the owners of our health service, our utilities, and the trains and the ferries and Grangemouth while we're on you know.
Absolutely, I'm with you. Well, I'll just say that Charlie's family jewels will be wiped off the tabloids tomorrow. Jurgen Klopp's resignation will top everything. That's how shallow our media are. I bet it will not be Charlie's balls. It will be Klopp's balls we'll be talking about tomorrow in the papers.
Klopp's far more interesting than the crown
Well,
jewels.
indeed, he's more of a king in Liverpool, that's for sure. Phil, the old socialising the losses, privatising the profits. This dirty trick with the Tories is disgusting, is it not?
Yeah, but completely expected, and really what we've got to make sure is that we understand that Scottish Water is excluded from this particular manoeuvre. Although that's not to say it wouldn't be captured in future with future privatisation, because clearly that's the way the British government are going. No, the Guardian reported on this, and it stated that the England's water companies, England and Wales water companies, were environmentally insolvent because they don't have the financial means to raise the 260 billion needed to deal with the sewage spillages. Well, why don't you just pump all the raw sewage into the sea? That might help you for a little while. Seems they've been doing that already. And the report, it was Richard Murphy, our friend and top man, who understands the accountancy and the balance sheet of an independent Scotland and why should all vote for it. Should read more. Richard Murphy's very, very good. And anyway, did the a Sheffield University finding, and he says that the high debts, in particular with Thames Water, which serves 15 million people, has got a $10 billion hole in their finances. So what do the UK government do? It's updating water company insolvency laws, because the Department for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs last week quietly issued legislation to update the 3-decade-old special administration regime for water monopolies in England and Wales. And the new law will give them more options for special administration to restructure the companies that are unable to repay their debts, and may make it less likely that the government is forced to renationalise the water. So the government want to continue to put the troughters first and provide poorer and poorer service for the people while putting profits before service. What we really need to do is nationalise what England. It's their business. Do you know what? It's their business. What we need to do is get independent and put our own house in order.
But it's not just their business, Phil, because here's what's going to happen. They're going to need money. And
they'll get it from us.
8.9% of that debt that's borrowed will be lumped onto Scotland. So,
yep.
Yeah, it is.
The problem.
It is maybe they've got it down there, but we'll get lumped with it. Lloyd.
Yeah, that's why we need to go. We need to get independent. Number one, that's all that matters.
Yeah, it's the solution to everything, folks. But Lloyd, just to, we'll finish off on this, on that question, the water company. It's absolutely disgusting what the Tories are trying to do here.
Well, it is, but as Phil pointed out, that was always what they were going to do. The Tories will never allow the renationalisation of anything. But one thing I would say is I've kept abreast of this madness, primarily because of a certain young man from Derry in Northern Ireland who was in a band called the Undertones, Feargal Sharkey, who has been an absolute thorn in the side of both his local water board, the Tory government, and everyone. And here we are. It's taken a boy for Derry to actually turn this into some kind of a campaign. I mean, his stuff about it is absolutely fantastic. So not only is he a fine singer and had possibly one of the greatest singles ever,
Teenage Kicks. Yeah.
It's nice to see your teenage heroes still doing heroic things when they hit their 60s.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, my teenage heroes are all dead. But that's what happens when you get to a certain age. Ladies, gentlemen, thank you very much. And you know, this is the first week ever where Yvonne doesn't owe me £1. She's not, yeah, which I think it's a first. She didn't have the mute on once. Well done, Yvonne. This is great news. So thanks for joining us. Thanks for you watching. I hope this has been of interest to you. And until we see you again, and you and yours, please take care.
Through a Scottish Prism, the programme that is unapologetically pro-Scottish independence and anti-Westminster rule. Everything we say here is viewed through a Scottish Prism. Brought to you by Barhead Boy.